Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Welcome to the Wrap Podcast, the place to catch up on all the regional and national rugby in Wales. You can find us on all the usual social media platforms and message us through there if you want, or you can email us on welshregionalrugbypod@gmail.com. So all the boring stuff out the way, let's talk rugby.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Wrap Podcast with me, Lee G. Joining me as always is Jamie and Harley. How are you, gentlemen?
Evening, very well.
Good evening. I'm quite grateful for having the extra 2 days before we recorded.
I thought it was very generous of everybody to fill in those couple of days. If we'd have recorded this on Monday when we were going to, and we'd have missed out on so much stuff, I think it's very kind of everybody to go, do you know what, boys, we'll give you something to talk about. Because obviously there was nothing to talk about on Monday. So, Carwyn sends his apologies. He's got a couple of issues that need to be dealt with. None of them involve the pub. I'm assured of that. So, hopefully he'll be back again next week. So let's start with a couple of basics. And I am absolutely delighted to announce, I've seen the doctor today. I am back on Drink of the Week. We are not on water for Drink of the Week. So
that's good news.
That's good news. Really good news. So, Harley, what have you got for Drink of the Week, my friend?
So, I can't remember. I think it's something that Carwyn might have had on before, but I've gone for going through the random beer shelf on Tesco's. I've got some Elvis juice, so a grapefruit IPA. I'll be honest, you can't really taste the grapefruit. It's more of an infusion, supposed to be brewed, but it's quite palatable. But to jazz it up a bit, I do have one of my fancy Pilsner glasses, which is actually a scientific beaker made into it, reblown into the shape of the thing.
So what's it got? It's got all the measurements and stuff down the side, is it? It's got
so it's got graduated markings for milliliters up to 450. and a little. I don't know if you can see. I mean, but there's a little spout on there. That's make it easier to pour down the sink when you get a terrible one.
That's proper dedication, that is, Ali, mate. That's committing to the cause, that is. So, James, what have you got, mate?
Well, I promised you a silly one, didn't I, last week?
I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, so Northern Monk Brewery have been doing a lot of silly beers lately. They've just released an Aunt Bessie's pack that's like roast dinner flavour, jam roly-poly and custard. I haven't got that one, but I have got a beer from Northern Monk. And see how silly you think this is. So this is a rocket lolly beer.
I mean, come on.
It's 4.7%, and the flavour is strawberry, orange, and pineapple. a hot power takeoff to give you a fruity cosmic blast. Now, does it taste like a rocket lolly? Yes. Do I like it? It's okay. I certainly won't have it again. But I've tried it now, and I saw it in Sainsbury's. I thought, yeah, that's daft. That's silly. Let's get that on the pod. So, yeah, a rocket lolly IPA from Northern Monk.
But the whole point of a rocket lolly is like you gotta lick the bottom bit first, and then you've got to get like the red bit, and then you're gonna get the purple bit. How do you get the three different flavors differently, man? I mean, they haven't thought that one through, have they?
It does taste like a rocket lolly, though. It does. In fairness, it does actually taste like a rocket lolly. But I mean, I haven't had a rocket lolly for years, but it's just a very fruity beer, if I'm honest. But it's okay. It's fine. But I had to try it. As soon as I saw it on the shelf, I thought, right, I need a stupid beer. Rocket lolly. Yep, that'll do. So I picked it up. So, yeah, that's what I got tonight.
It's weird that 12 months ago, when I would have been walking down the beer aisle 12 months ago, and I'd have seen the cherry pie beer and the candy floss cider, I go, oh, what fucking ridiculous shit is that? And now I'm like, oh, we're having that. That's on a 3 for 4. That's right. That's the next month of pods done. Yeah, dreadful.
Gotta find stupid beers now. Yeah. I that's why I look for. I go to the supermarket now. I don't think right. Need to get food. Need to get eggs, milk. Let's look at the silly beers.
Let's get priorities. Well,
yes.
Mine is actually. So I've had this one in the cupboard for a while, because it's a South African cider, and I thought this was planning ahead. Now, as I said, they're on a 4 for 3, and I bought this like before my operation, and I thought, all right, okay, well, that's fine. We'll keep that one for the South African game. So this is a thing, and it's called Scully, yeah, and there's a bit on the back that says, where's it gone now? Where's it gone? It basically tells you how to pronounce it. Oh, there we go. Struggling to pronounce it. You're not the first. In South Africa, we say the X like a K. So Scully. So I thought I'd have a crack at that. It's a Granny Smith cider, which I've never had a Granny Smith's not a great cider apple, but it's okay. It's fresh. If it was like a Saturday afternoon and you're sitting in the sun and stuff, it's a fresh one. But I say it's yeah. Other than that
sounds all right. I'd give that a go if I see it.
Yeah, I mean it's a bit sharp for a cider. You know, it's got a really, you can tell it's a Granny Smith. It tastes of Granny Smith, which is a little bit odd, but interesting. It's an interesting one. So yeah, and obviously Carwyn has told me he's on his baby sham tonight. So
of course,
the mantle has moved from Reese over to Carwyn, and as punishment for not being here next week, he's on the baby sham again. So let's move on from that. I know you're going to love this next bit now, James. So not only have I got a new theme tune for Newsdesk, yeah, but I was looking for to see if I could find it on YouTube. So let's see if you remember this one. Ready?
Come on, then.
Jamie's Newsdesk. Newsdesk. I got it wrong, didn't I?
What the hell is that?
That's Grandstand. Jamie's Newsdesk. Jamie's Newsdesk. Jamie's Newsdesk. Oh, I can't stop it now. Stop. So yeah, Jamie's Newsdesk to the theme of Grandstand. One of these weeks I'm going to actually record it and put a decent one there for you, mate. But so what have we got on the news deck this week, Jane?
Right, let's start with some Ospreys news, shall we? Good news if you're an Ospreys fan. Maybe not so good news if you want to see some further development and progress in the under-20s. But the Ospreys have announced Mark Jones is going to be their new defence coach. He's going to link up with Toby Booth. Of course, that does mean that he will have to leave his post as coach of the Wales under-20s, which is a bit of a shame because I thought he did a really good job. You know, in the championship, he seemed to turn around from the disastrous Six Nations. But yeah, it's a very good appointment for the Ospreys, but a loss, I think, for the age grade setup.
And I think he's proven his capabilities as a coach. He was in RGC. He did very well at RGC. He went to New Zealand as a defence coach.
Yeah, Crusaders.
Yeah, he came back to Worcester before they were. So he's definitely got something about him. For what it's worth, I think he's a better coach than he was a player. I think it's a massive coup for the Ospreys, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's reflective of the way the WRU think of the under-20s. That's Byron Haywood wasn't that great a coach. As soon as they get a decent coach in, he's off to a region, and it doesn't feel like there's any stability in the under-20s. And then we wonder why we're getting pounded by Italy and Georgia in the under-20s. I know we haven't got pounded by the Georgians yet, but it's a matter of time. So yeah, if somebody somewhere's got to put their mark on the under-20s and commit to the under-20s. So yeah, hopefully after the World Cup, there'll be a couple of coaches that decide to call it a day at the senior level and might be available for junior level. So we might get a bit of stability there. But cracking for the Ospreys, gutting for Wales under-20s on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, shall we move on?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's Hardy. Do you have anything to say about Mark Jones going to the Ospreys? Or
just really, I thought Ospreys' defence was already pretty good. I thought it was their attack that's pretty woeful. Like, really, they could have done with. But I agree with Lee. It definitely feels like the under-20s being treated as second class, and it's not. We're for all the talk of the WRU trying to stabilise the foundations of Welsh rugby. They seem to do absolutely everything to pull up from the bottom and try and build on sand. It's the same thing with the women's game. And as soon as the women started performing, everyone was like, "Oh, we should get Young Cunningham into the men's setup." And I just don't like it. I think they, need to actually establish and put emphasis on how important development sides are, and the women's game as well, which is actually the only part of the sport that's growing, really.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not going to lie, if I was an Ospreys fan, I'd be pretty happy with this appointment. I think that's really good work to get him in.
Yeah.
But, okay, so that's that. Other news, Abby Tierney has been announced as the new CEO of the Welsh Rugby Union. She's currently at the Home Office, where she is an ethics advisor and chair of the People Committee. Make of that what you will, if you're politically minded and you're following what's been happening at the Home Office. So she's a civil servant, but before she went into civil service, her previous roles included being a business development director for Circle Health and a marketing leader for IBM. So what do you make of that then, Harley? I mean, when you saw, Abby being announced, was you happy, or did you think, it seemed to have gone down mixed reaction on Twitter, isn't it?
I think it's one of those ones where when they announced the new CEO, I was just excited for, oh wow, a woman, they've actually followed on one of the trades. And I'll be honest, if there was any woman who I wanted to take the job of WRU CEO, it was Amanda Blanc, but that bridge is long burnt. I mean, on the face of it, the fact that her, she hadn't really been in elite sport, but then that's apparently part of the reason why Nigel Walker's sticking around with the board is, he's going to cover that side of things.
Yeah.
But she also hadn't shown any real top, until you actually drill right down, you see, okay, maybe I can see where this big business thing is. It looks mostly that she's been employed because a lot of her job roles have involved culture development, which, as we know, the culture at WRU is absolutely shocking. I mean, being one of those politically minded people about the Home Office at the moment, I'm not sure someone from there is the person I want making policies. I can't wait to hear about how any Tame Plumtree is now being shipped back to New Zealand because he doesn't have a British pass. He wasn't born here, so he can't play now. I think it's going to be one of those ones that we're just going to have to wait and see. Hopefully, she's having experience in marketing and business development. Hopefully, that'll be beneficial for the whole for the whole umbrella. So the Wales, Team Wales, and the regions, trying to get them developed. So when in her press conference, she was talking a lot about trying to encourage increases in revenue streams. Not necessarily just the rugby. Time will tell, though, if that's just bluff and bluster or if she's going to have something actually meaningful to contribute.
Yeah, I mean the home office stuff is what pretty much everyone has picked up on, isn't it? You know?
Being
It's
an
not really a
ethics,
good look, is it? Yeah.
no, being the ethics advisor to one of the most hated politicians in the land isn't. You'd scrub that from your CV, wouldn't you? You go, oh, I've been a civil servant for the last 2 years. You know, I can't say much about it. It's all very hush hush. You know, um, everybody gets a fair crack of the whip, unless you're on the wrong end of the Home Office. So yeah,
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 I would have gone for Andy Marinos. I would have. I think he was the best candidate out of the ones that was mentioned in public. But I think we gotta just see how it goes. We gotta give her a chance. You know, there's people writing her off already, and I think, well, no, let's see what she can do in post first.
Yeah.
And when you look at her CV, it is actually quite an impressive CV. Okay, she hasn't got anything in sports or anything like that, but that doesn't mean that she won't make an impact in this role. I think we need to give her a chance and just see exactly what she can bring. But it's a tough job, and best of luck to her. That's what I say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, let's move on to Cardiff then. So they've announced some re-signings this week. So they announced Harry Millard and Jamie Hill. Then on Wednesday afternoon, they announced the big one, the return of 37-year-old Ray Lilo, to the delight of many, many Cardiff fans. So, Harley, you must be over the moon with Ray Lilo returning.
To be honest, I'm over the moon with all three because I think Jamie Hill, before he had a pretty terrible injury which ruled him out for most of last season, but he was shown as sort of like almost the next Lloyd Williams and being very, very, very good at kicking off both feet. I know Lee's not one for kicking, but if you're going to do it, you should at least do it well. Harry Millard has sort of been that very good squad player for the last few years. You know, is he really a centre? I think he's probably better as a back three. He's got fantastic pace. His defence out on the wing's really good, not so much at 13. But I think Cardiff have been suffering from having the aforementioned Ray Lilo. You know, when you've got someone who's that good, you're gonna pick him. And I don't know if that means that, you know, other players haven't necessarily had the chance to see the same pictures he has. But I'm hoping with Lilo coming back, it is going to be a bit more of a mentoring role more than being there to play. So, you know, with Mason Grady, he's still raw. Yeah, he's going on to a World Cup. But I think anyone who's watching play, you can see that he's not fully clued up to defending the 13 channel. I mean, yes, you'll learn that with experience, but it also helps when you have someone who is a very good defender in that channel. So I think it's three very good signings, and the squad is now starting to look a lot less bleak than it was.
Well, you've got enough players to actually put a team on the pitch now, haven't you? I mean, not necessarily in all the right positions, but you've actually got 15 players signed, plus a tea lady and someone to look after the kit. So, you know, going in the right direction.
I'm a bit gutted because I was hoping for a team of sevens, but it looks like we're gonna, actually have like props and scrum halves and shit now.
Yeah, it's good for Cardiff just to have a bit of stability, though, isn't it? Just to sign some players, and it almost doesn't matter who they are. They're signing someone and just sending the right message out. So yeah, fair play to them. Yeah.
Do we think that Willis Halaholo might return, or is that door shut now? Do you think?
I think it's going to depend on how much they can actually offer him, because, you know, Willis has been quite open about the fact that he really wants to stay. You know, he's made I think he lives in Barry with them. I think him, Ray, and Nick Williams all live fairly close to each other in Barry, and there's a nice little community, little sub community of Cardiff rugby out there. I mean, I'd love him back. I genuinely think Cardiff are a better team. You know, they always look a better side when Willis is there. Whether or not they can offer him enough money for him to think it's worth for his family. You know, someone who's trying to negotiate through contracts and stuff myself, you know, you've got to make sure, you know, number one is having a job is better than no job, but at the same time, if you can't afford to live on your job, you might as well not have one.
See, I think with him, it's more about how his exit was handled. You know, if it wasn't handled correctly, then he'll be sitting there going like, do you know what, you could offer me as much as you want, I'm not coming back. But if it was handled with a bit of tact and a bit of, honesty and humility, that we'd love to keep you on, but the financial situation is that, we can't afford you. This is what we can offer, and we know that's below what you're worth. So if you want to go look elsewhere, then, by all means, you have our support, but we would love to keep you. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference between that and you're off, son. We can't afford you.
From what I gathered, I mean, like, Di was very open about the fact that, he was turning around to players saying, look, this is, like, we could literally only afford you, like, 30k, and, we want you, but we can't afford you. So I think it is probably more that former. And from things I've seen with something, I think his, whenever he's shown his frustration about it, it's been more directed at the WRU than necessarily the powers that be at Cardiff. So I'm hoping maybe
it's that form on.
If he is offered back, I'll be surprised if he does come back, because if we didn't have the money to keep these guys in the first place, I don't know how we can afford to re-sign them, unless some of them are taking quite substantial pay cuts. We're only getting coaches in on a part-time basis.
That's because you only defend on a part-time basis, mate.
Part-time more than the Scarlets do. One of the best.
Moving on.
Yes. Moving on. Right, okay, so let's talk about the news that has been dominating the rugby world for the past week or so, and we will have to mention it. Owen Farrell. So without going into too much detail, I think we all pretty much know the gist of what's happened. So World Rugby did win their appeal this week, which means Owen Farrell missed the start of the World Cup after being handed a 4-match ban for his high hit on Tain Basham, of course. It has been backdated to include last week's defeat to Ireland, even though Farrell could have appeared in that game, which is a massive cop-out as far as I'm concerned. Big cop-out. So Farrell was initially given a 6-match ban. It was reduced to 4 due to his, and I quote, acceptance of foul play, clear demonstration of remorse, and, I like this bit, his good character. Which is really ironic, isn't it? Because he's been doing this shit for years and he's not learning the lessons. And now I like Owen Farrell. I know this stuff about the witch hunt, I don't want to get personal about it. It's no witch hunt for me against Owen Farrell. I like him, I respect him, but seriously now, fucking wise up and learn the lessons, because this cannot keep happening. It just can't. So that's an end to the sorry saga. And then today, Billy Finnapola has been banned for 3 games, which it can be reduced to 2 if he goes to tackle school. So he's also going to miss the start of the Rugby World Cup. So what are our thoughts on this whole sorry mess then with Owen Farrell? I know you're quite vocal on it, haven't you, on social media?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a very simple equation that if you can't tackle low, then you're off the pitch. It is genuinely as simple as that. And, names and all of that kind of stuff don't come into it. It's if you're in a low crouch position, ready to tackle low, and the player gets moved into you and hits your shoulder, I think that's different, because you're in a low tackle position and you can't move out the way. If you're standing upright with your shoulder braced for, what we used to practice bloody shoulder charges when I was starting to play, if you're in that shoulder charge position and somebody nudges somebody's head into your shoulder, you are never ready to tackle. So you deserve the red card, and you deserve everything that comes with it. On my bit, I've got 2 issues with it. One is the people that say, "Oh, well, we want the best players at the World Cup." If he can't tackle low, he's not one of the best players. End of. 50% of the game is defense. If you look at it that way, 50% attack, 50% defense. If you cannot defend properly and safely, then you've got no business. You are not one of the best players on the pitch. You are 50% of a best player. And the amount of times that he has damaged players, and this is the second point, is that he is damaging other players' brains. And I don't care how good you are, if you're Gareth Edwards or Shane Williams or whatever, if you are putting a fellow professional in danger that way, then you've got no business being on. You wouldn't put that in any other industry on the planet. You wouldn't have a bank manager who comes in and every morning he twats one of the mortgage advisors and they go, oh, yeah, but he's a good manager. He's a good manager. Yeah. You wouldn't stand for it. So for me, it's like you said, it's not about personality. Any player that tackles like that cannot train themselves at a professional level to tackle properly has got no business being on the pitch. And I think World Rugby and the rugby community, we need to start getting serious with it now. Because I think there are too many people in the rugby community that make excuses for these people, and they shouldn't be. They should be calling it out and saying, if you can't tackle, off the pitch until you can tackle. End of. There you go. That's my bit done.
It's frustrating because I rate Owen Farrell. I do think he's world class. I think he's an excellent player. However, it is clear that he has a technique problem. And he's had this problem for a long time. He has a history of doing this. And the penny needs to drop. It really does. And I'm hoping that this will finally be that moment. But I find it frustrating because, you know, it's nothing personal against Owen Farrell. I really rate him. But we have got to eradicate this, and he's got to start learning the lessons because it can't keep happening. Harley, do you have any words on the Farrell situation? What's your take on it?
I mean, so talking around with like some of the people who I do rugby training with, you know, some of them play for other clubs or have contacts in other clubs. They've been saying like how many penalties, you know, some of these pre-season games, they're getting 20, 30 penalties in the first half because they're trying to clamp down on this. And the word going around to all the coaches, no matter what level you are in the amateur game, is about getting lower, getting lower, getting lower. And that's what they're talking about. If you're not, you know, if you're then spending your Tuesday, Thursday nights and Saturday mornings and you're drilling down, getting lower, getting lower, getting lower, and then you see, you know, basically players you're aspiring to be tackling high and then getting away with it, well then why are you putting through all the effort? You know, if it's not being taken seriously at the top level of the game, why should you put the effort at the low level of the game? That's the first one. The second thing is, I think, not because it's Farrell or anyone, I think if you've had to go to an appeal because you've argued that you haven't got a red card, when you have that appeal, you should not be able to get that week off for admitting it was a foul play because you've had your chance and you've lost it. Whether or not you should have a week off for admitting it, another story, or whether or not you should be having weeks added on for not admitting it, that's a conversation for another time. I think the Billy Villapola one's fair enough. All right, so he's good. He's only really missing Argentina, but that, you know, and that might be a game England aren't targeting because they think, well, actually, if we come second our pool, as long as we can win the other 3 games, it doesn't matter. I'm really not surprised about the backdating of Farrell's. You know, because if you use the argument of saying, well, no, because if this was the correct decision, and if it had been done when it was supposed to have been done, he would have been banned for that game. I agree it's a cop-out. But at this point, I just want to move on. I'm fed up with talking about it. If he does it again, then I think, you know, World Rugby needs to be serious. I mean, I'm a long believer in once you get to, I think teams should be looked at, and if they get a certain number of red cards for the same offence, World Rugby or whoever's the governing body looking at that competition should be stepping in and saying, this must be some, you know, it can't just be the players, there must be something wrong with the coaching. And then you start looking at, do you do fines? Do you do points deduction? Do you have to have someone come in and actually monitor training to make sure they are actually going down lower? But I mean, again, we could be here all night talking about those sorts of things.
But
absolutely.
If you look at the way the Scarlets were the first half of last season, cards left, right, and centre, and then it shows that you can change that culture. You can change, because the second half of the season, I think there was only 1 yellow card or something that quite close to the end of the season. It can be changed. You can adjust what's happening, and you can change the mentality of the players. So these are professional players, and it can be changed. And if they choose not to change it, then they deserve everything they get. Anyway, what's next, Jay?
What's next? Okay, so I want to pay tribute to someone who's retired this week. Fly half Eleanor Stossill has hanged up with boots. Fantastic career, brilliant role model for Welsh rugby. 76 Wales caps and 4 World Cups. Fantastic. I mean, what else could you say? brilliant servant for Welsh rugby, excellent player, great role model. And I hope she has a very happy retirement.
Is she going to go into coaching? I heard somebody say they hope she goes into coaching, but she hasn't said anything about it, is she?
Not as far as I'm aware, but I mean, she would be an excellent coach once all that experience. You could certainly see her going into coaching, couldn't you?
Yeah,
And it'd be good, for her to give something back to the game as well. I think she'd be an excellent coach.
I think similar to a lot of other pro players, she does, like obviously like Josh Turnbull was a coach with Newcastle, and then we've had to Sidmouth Rugby Club. We've got Phil Dolman and Sean Maltz, who are former Exeter Chief players, and Jack Gendall's coach. You do get. I think a couple of the Exeter Chief women actually coach the women's team. But, so I think she's already doing that. Whether she's doing high-level coaching yet is another story. I just want to say 67 caps and 4 World Cups. I think that's a damning indictment of where the state of the women's game has been throughout her whole career. And the fact that, Squid Rugby said it best when he said, like, genuinely a player who was getting better every single game she played. But can you imagine how good she'd have been if she had the sort of support players coming through now? And I just want to say, thank God, rugby as a sport is actually starting to take women's rugby seriously now, and we can actually see these players getting better and having high-class facilities, proper training. It's not perfect by any means, but I'm glad it's going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Is that it?
That's it for the news.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it for news.
So, am I going to need to record like an end of the news desk, kind of like an outro, a news desk outro as well now? Because I can do both.
Absolutely not.
You've heard my vocal talent.
Yeah, once is enough. Once is more than enough. I don't need to hear any more of your theme tunes, quite frankly.
Just a little weather-related advert, similar to like in between the ITV news and weather. Transition.
Right, let's move on to the weekend's rugby. Let's make this short and sharp. So,
do we have to talk about this?
I'm afraid we do, mate. I'm afraid we do. Harley, have you got any interesting stats that are not going to completely depress us from the South Africa game?
Our lineup was at 93%.
that's the one stat that isn't depressing. Well,
the rest is pretty. Bear in mind that possession was 51-49 in favour of the Boks. These are post contact meters, so this is actually getting past tackle. So it's not just padded out by fullbacks running. Post contact meters, the Springboks made 317 to Wales' 170, and they made 13 line breaks to our 5. It's just pretty. I think probably the worst one. So the one positive I had for the England game the week before was how good our red zone efficiency was. The problem was that we didn't get into the red zone enough. This time our red zone efficiency was 1.4 points per entry, and we only had 5 of the bloody things. Compared to the Boks with 4.3. Basically as soon as they were getting in, they were getting at least a penalty in a bit, and that has to improve. Because all 4 of our teams in our pool are teams who will score points when they're in the red zone. Georgia now aren't just a scrum and some heavy midfield carriers. They've actually got a cohesive backline that likes to pass and go around teams. Portugal love running rugby, and we already know enough about Fiji. And I think speaking of Fiji, the worrying stat isn't even to do with this game. Against France, Fiji made 208 metres through the middle of France, who aren't exactly a small team.
And that
just gives you an idea that Fiji are learning how to play other kinds of rugby. And that is terrifying.
Well, that was a strong France side that they put out as well. And I think
it wasn't full strength, though, was it? It wasn't full,
but it was pretty bloody close. With the exception.
It's a side that would do a number on us.
Yeah,
but it wasn't a full strength either. It was strong. Yeah.
The French national under-15s would have a good shot at doing a number on us at the minute, I think.
Oh, no doubt.
So let's have a look at the backs then. So Harley, what did you make of the backs it was split at backs and forwards. So what did you make of the backs on Saturday? Who stood out for you and all of that kind of stuff?
Positives. I'll leave with some nice positives. For the first 20 minutes, which I've had to watch and replay because I was doing some rugby of my own at that time. Well, not really. I was holding a tackle bag. It was so the kick chase was really good. I was really impressed with the kick chase. It was really solid. I thought Kai Evans actually for a debutant fullback was pretty solid under the hype. He was pretty solid. He did what was asked. It wasn't enough for me to say, right, he definitely needs to get into the World Cup squad, but I thought it was a really good outing. Going to the bad news, I think Johnny Williams and Mason Grady, you could tell they're not used to playing with it. Well, you can tell that was the first time they played. And I think when Max Llewellyn went in at 13, I don't think that worked at all. Personally, I think Max is a much better 12 than 13, but can push out. Johnny, I think he's so used to having Joe Roberts, who's very good at closing gaps in behind whilst Johnny shoots out of the line. Whereas Grady is used to having a 12 who keeps him connected and pushes him out to defend more like a winger. So Johnny's shooting up, Mason Grady's trying to drift out, and we're getting huge holes. I think Tom Rogers had a very hard introduction into. When you consider where his other caps are, that was a very hard game for him. It's not enough. I mean, I've seen some people saying, he's mediocre and URC level at best. I don't quite agree with that. I just think it was a very rough day at the office when the backline did not fire.
I think
it's not really much. Didn't really have a platform, so there's not really a lot you can say about the backs, really. I mean, Johnny Williams did make some nice meters in the first 20 minutes. And then that got slightly less effective as South Africa realised he was the only player carrying.
So, Jane, what did you make of it defensively? What did you make of the backs defensive? Because that's where the issues were defensively, and it kind of, the more they played together, the less kind of connected they were through the game. So what did you make of the backs defensively on Saturday?
It was tough, wasn't it? And I did feel for Tom Rogers. I mean, he had a horrid time defensively, didn't he? And Cheslin Colby, he was just causing chaos. It just had the feel of a team that had been thrown together, and that's exactly what it was. We got to remember there was a lot of players hadn't played together, a lot of combinations that hadn't played together. There was no real understanding, and we knew South Africa were going to be a threat. We knew that, but yeah, it was just very painful to watch. But what did annoy me was we knew it was going to be a mismatch when we saw the lineups, but the tries that we conceded, 4 of them were very, very soft. They were interceptions, they were errors, and that's really frustrating. Because the first half, I actually thought we were doing okay. We were in the fight. I mean, the second half was just, it fell apart, didn't it? But it was just disastrous. And we had no platform whatsoever, which we'll talk about in a bit. But it just had the feel and the look of a team that had been thrown together. It was just a very, very difficult day. No one really stood out and had a brilliant game. I thought Jack Morgan was excellent. I know he's not back, but he put in a hell of a shift in difficult circumstances. But I think we did struggle with the physicality of South Africa. We struggled with the pace, and it was a pretty tough watch, wasn't it? It really was. And some players were just in no man's land with the defence and the pace and the power of South Africa. It was brutal, unfortunately.
Well, let's talk about the forwards then. So before we talk about the forwards, there was an interesting interview before in the build up to it, and I think it was Oxenich that was talking, and they were talking about what's your diet like. There was him and a winger or a scrum half or whatever, and you couldn't get 2 players that were more different. And they said, what's your calorie intake going through the week? And whoever it was, the winger or whatever, goes, it's like this on a Monday, and then as I get to game time, I change it to this and this, and I monitor my calories. And then they said to Oxenich, how many calories are you on a day? He said, about 9 slices of cake. And I just thought, we need players like that. We when you look at the size of him coming on, we need players like that can deliver a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Real character.
I'm a huge fan of Oxenchafe for that. I think one of the best pictures of him, which they always wheel out whenever he's selected for a squad or whatever, and it's him with a slice of cake and on a chalkboard, and it just says "Salads don't win scrums."
Yeah, yeah, I've got that.
Which is true.
Yeah, it's true. So, what did we make of the forwards then, Jamie? What was it anyone in the forwards that kind of did themselves some credit on Saturday?
Well, look, let's put this into context because it's pretty important. Okay, so if you look at the South African pack, they had 395 caps, right? Wales, by comparison, had 196 caps. 70 of those belong to Dan Lydiard. Yeah, so that sums up the difference in experience, and that comes for quite a lot at the test level. So the pack was always going to be up against it. We knew the scrum was always going to be up against it, and the stats for the scrum are not very good at all. I don't know if you've seen the scrum stats. So the percentage stats, South Africa are at 100%, which is no surprise whatsoever. Wales's scrum stats were 44%, which it tells you an awful lot, doesn't it? South Africa lost 0 scrums. How many scrums do you think Wales lost of their own scrums?
I can remember 3. I think I can. Yeah, can I? Definitely 3. It depends if you class losing a penalty or just losing a ball out the side or whatever. So yeah, I'm going to go 3.
Ali, how do you reckon? It was 5 scrums. Wales lost 5 scrums.
Yeah, you cheated. Sir, he's cheating.
Well, you asked me to do all the stats, so yes, I've got all the stats up on the screen. I don't memorise them.
But, the scrum was particularly painful to watch, wasn't there? And, there's a lot of criticism of, Domachevsky and Asurati, but I think people need to understand and get a grip, okay? This was their second cap. And some people just seem to think that they can come from Cardiff, come from the URC, just jump straight up into test level and start scrummaging against like the world's best props. It don't work like that. It's going to take time, and Wales need to stick with these boys as well. And, they are sticking with Domachevsky, and I'm pleased about that. He's going to the World Cup. Asurati as well, they got to stick with him. He is one for the future. They got to stick with these boys. And we're going to have to go through a lot of pain at scrum time. But this is how they learn. This is how they learn by coming up against the best and getting more time, more experience. So, when I see people criticize Domachevsky and Asurati, they need to wind their necks in and realise that they're inexperienced, they're young, and this is only their second cap. So when I see shit on social media say they're not international standard, they're not up to it, well, no, you can't write them off after 2 caps because that's just stupid. They need time at this level. It's dull. It just shows you don't know your rugby if you're going to write off a prop after just 2 caps.
Bear in mind as well that, the prop who conceded the most penalties that game was Franz Mahut. You can see 2. And also our supposed stronger pair of props, and some people are arguing these are the props that should be started. Nicky Smith and Henry Thomas, they both conceded penalties each at the scrum.
Yes. So when they come on, I don't know if you remember, when they first came on, the very first scrum got absolutely demolished.
Yeah.
Absolutely demolished when they changed the prop. So this was an issue that had to go. Exactly. So, they made no impact. The scrum didn't really improve. It was just a struggle all day. Positives from the forwards. I mean, the line-out was a positive, in fairness. Elliot D, it's not all down to the hooker, of course, but, he is looking very reliable with his arrows, and I thought that the line-out was pretty good. Jack Morgan, I mentioned earlier, I thought he put in a really big shift in losing cause. Dan Lydiard, he was good defensively. He was Wales' top tackler. Rowlands went the full 80, put in another big shift. Ben Carter was okay. He didn't really do much wrong. He didn't really stand out either, and I think maybe that's why he's probably missed out because we don't really see big moments from Carter in international rugby. As much as I like him, we haven't really seen him stand out and put in a huge performance. So yeah, it was tough, wasn't it? And if you've got no platform in international rugby, then you're going to be struggling. So yeah, it was a very tricky day for the front 5, I'm afraid, and for the pack.
And I think the thing is, with a scrum, props will always take the heat off a scrum if your scrum's going back. But there's 8 men in the scrum, and you have to. It's not just about the guys at the guys at the front are important because they give you a base, but actually, it's a combination of everybody in there. Everybody's got to have an input into that scrum, and that for me was a disappointing bit. Is we didn't, and I said this about the lineouts a couple of weeks ago. We didn't have a plan B. When we saw that scrum wasn't where we wanted it to be, there wasn't a call for the old route one ball. Where it goes straight from the hooker out between the flanker and the number 8, and the number 8 just picks it up and flicks it to the scrum half. And it's literally a second, maybe a second and a half between the scrum half putting the ball in and getting the pass back. We knew we were coming up against the big boys, and we didn't have another option. We didn't have a what else can we do? We didn't have somebody going. There wasn't a little bit of niggle. We didn't try to put them off the game, and I think this is where we talk about learning the game at international level. When you talk to some of the guys that have been there and done it, they will tell you that the dark arts are very much dark arts, and you've got to twist, you've got to bend, you've got to kind of push the rules, you've got to let them go down, and then as they're coming up, you've got to give them a bit of an elbow in the ear and all of that kind of stuff. You've got to put them off their game, and that's what comes with time and with experience, and to a certain extent, a little bit of coaching. And I think that's where we're missing stuff now. Is we're not coaching that scrum to win. We're coaching that scrum to kind of cope.
Yeah.
And we're not thinking outside of the box. Same as line outs. We need to have a second option. I agree. I thought the line out, I actually didn't have that much of a problem with the line out.
It went well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought on their ball we looked like we were trying to compete, but we still need to have a second option, for when we do come up against like England.
With the line out, I think it does help having Will Rowlands there, because when him and Beard were paired in the past, Rowlands was the defensive line out captain, so he was the one who was deciding if we're going to go up or if we're just going to get ready to defend them all. It's also worrying that when our supposed best line-out forward was... it's come out now since that. What I said on the pod after last week was it might have been right that they were trying out a new set of calls, and that might be why the line-out's gone wrong. But I thought... we'll go on to it when we talk about the squad, but I think Rowlands is guaranteed to start the second row, but for me, I'd probably, if he's fit, I'd be putting David Jenkins in, because I think our line-out just is so much smoother, and I think you get a lot more around the park as well. When we go on to the squad, we'll talk about Carter. I quite like him. He doesn't do anything flash, but I think we do need some players who are just doing the bare bones and just getting through work. Because it allows if you're getting through all the bare work, I don't know. But if you've got one or two players who are doing all the basics, that was the classic role of blindside, was to not be noticed. And if you notice the blindside, it's usually because they've done something wrong.
Yeah.
That to me, that's what a good blindside does. A good blindside is always the one that the referee's looking at the blindside going, I'm watching you, son, and I know you're up to something dodgy, and I'm going to catch you.
As much as I like Ben Carter, I did feel like he looked a little bit lightweight in that game at times. And I should give a mention as well to Teddy Williams, who has got really big potential. That was not a debut to remember, was it? Yeah, yellow carded. And I did feel sorry for him, because you could see it coming. The penalties were racking up. Somebody was going to get a yellow. I said to the wife, someone's going to get carded here. We were giving away so many penalties, offside, hands up. And unfortunately, it was Teddy. And I did feel sorry for him on his debut like that. You've just come on and then you get carded. And again, he's one for the future. But that just summed up the day for me as well. Not really a nice moment for him, was it?
It was quite funny being berated by Cardiff fans because I said he wasn't going to the World Cup, because there was on one of the regional group chats they were saying, who's definitely not coming to work? I went, Teddy Williams. He went, you can't judge him on 15 minutes. I went, well, no, I can judge him on 5 though, because that's all he had. I did want to bring out I'm actually a Cardiff fan. I love Teddy Williams, but you can't, he's been brought in for a token cap. I think him and Kai Evans, they were never seriously going to go.
Oh,
Like
no.
they'd have had to have done, it would have taken Carter to go off after 2 minutes and Teddy Williams have a man of the match for that to be a consideration.
Well,
but
it's
one of those things. Andrew Grace, as much as I love to hate him, he is very consistent with things like this. And if you are on a warning, you give away a penalty, even if the other team score a try, you're still going to lose a man.
Yeah.
Some people don't think it's fair. Some people complain when it doesn't happen. But it was one of those. Because I couldn't quite work out what was going on because we were drinking. It was in the clubhouse, and we were having a couple of jars. But it was just sort of a case of Teddy Williams comes on, and then I see the next thing, and I see Wainwright in the second row, and I'm like, where? And I kind of I couldn't quite connect when that happened.
It was just giving away penalty after penalty, and you knew a yellow was going to come, and unfortunately, it was Teddy Williams. But just to focus on this game quickly, right? Because the scoreline doesn't lie: 52-16, 8 tries to 1, heaviest defeat. Warren Gatland's 133, games in charge of Wales, right? It was ugly, it was brutal. But the overreaction on social media and the hot takes, and I gotta say, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, it really done my head in this weekend. This game is irrelevant. It has absolutely no bearing or relevance to how Wales are going to do in the World Cup. It was a complete mismatch on paper in terms of captain experience. Fair play to South Africa. Yeah, they took their chances. They were brutal. We gave them a lot of silly tries, right? But can we just drop the hot takes? Because, South Africa don't really learn a lot from that game, in all honesty. Yeah, from their point of view, Jessica had a great game. Manny Libbek has got a problem with his place kicking. It's good to see Sia Khaleesi back. We learned far more. I think Warren Gatland got a lot more out of this game than Jacques Neerbar. As brutal as it was, I think Gatland learned a hell of a lot about certain players. This game is utterly irrelevant. It's meaningless. Park it to the side, chuck it in the bin, let's move on. But the hot takes after the game, afterwards, was just absolutely ridiculous. No context. Yeah, we had all sorts. There's no context or lack of nuance on social media. People look at the scores and go, oh, well, Wales ain't going to get through. Look, they're getting battered. Oh, they're hopeless. They can lose to Georgia. No, that team was nowhere near what Wales' best team is going to be at the World Cup. It was a complete mismatch. So let's park the hot takes. Let's have a bit more positivity and a bit more nuance and context to the actual game. That's what I'm saying.
I think, though, that's the issue, is we haven't seen Wales's or what you would class as something close to our first team. Do you know what I mean? I think Fiji. I think Fiji have had 4 warm-up games, or they'll have had 4 warm-up games when they play England. England are playing more warm-up games. I mean, Ireland played Portugal, didn't really get much out of that game, but that's it now for us. But do you know what I mean? That's it. We've now got a month or 3 weeks until our first game, and I would have liked to have seen. I'm guessing there'll be a game behind closed doors against a regional select, or do you know what I mean? There'll be a game against someone that we don't see. But I would have liked to have seen our first 15 or something close to our first 15 on the pitch playing together, so we can, we just know what we're going to get. And saying that, I don't know if Gatland does know what that first 15 is yet. And he's not got another game to practice. He's not got another game to go, well, let me try this and let me try that.
I'm still positive, though. That game doesn't change how I feel about Wales. It doesn't, because it's a nothing game. It was a strong, experienced Springbok against a Wales C team. It was a nothing team. It was a nothing game. And people are going way over the top with the criticism of it. I know it was ugly. I know it was brutal. It wasn't nice to watch. But let's just see. The only results that matter now are the ones in France. So let's just be a bit more positive about it. Let's have a bit more context.
I don't know about you guys, but I feel like if it hadn't been for those last 2 tries right at the end of the first half, I think it probably would have stayed a lot tighter longer. And I feel like, you could tell with the way that the back line sort of dropped their heads for the second half that, it was a team with an average of 6 caps. Like there's an average of 6 caps in that starting back line. And across the whole 23, the backs only had an average of 11. They were average of 24 years old. Like if you're gonna throw out that, what was it, the regional A side? Imagine if we did a Wales A for under 23 players. A lot of these sorts of players would be in it. Across the whole squad, we were only looking at an average of 16 caps, and that inexperience showed. And I think the fact that you lost Bigger at 10, Cuthbert at 14, and Sanjay at 15, regardless of what you think of them as players, they're players who, for the most part, will not. They would have, like that one check Bigger shouts at Dyer aside, they would have, been able to regroup and sort of say, right, park that, right, let's next job. Whereas I think particularly you could see it with Tom Rogers as the game went on, it was starting to get to his head. And so, he missed a tackle. And then when he was there for the next tackle, he started second guessing too much. I mean, being up against Colby's going to be Jack Morgan seems to be the only person on the planet who can tackle Colby. But, again, I agree with Jamie. You can't really take too much for Wales from this. You might say, all right, what we can probably see a few things we need to work on for players who are going to the World Cup. And I think, there are certain aspects of the lineup I think were a lot better. I think I'm guessing they've just scrapped this new calling system.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? They changed. Well, let's talk about who is going to the World Cup then. Let's have a look at who's going. So just we'll run through the backs first. So we've got Josh Adams, Gareth Anscombe, Dan Biggar, Costello, Gareth Davis, Dyer, Grady, Halfpenny, George North, Rhys Zammit, Nick Tompkins, Johnny Williams, Liam Williams, Thomas Williams. So, Jamie, what would be your starting backline on those, and what do you make of those? I mean, there's still a lot of players there that haven't got a lot of caps, not a lot of experience, but then there's also a lot of players in there that do have an awful lot of experience. Halfpenny and Biggar are over 100. What do you make of that, and who do you start as your first backline?
Well, let's talk about the biggest talking point. Undoubtedly, of this squad is the fact there's only 2 scrum halves. Gatland's taking a gamble. No Kieran Hardy. I think that came as a shock to pretty much everyone. I mean, that was the biggest takeaway I had when I first saw the squad. The fact there was only 2 scrum halves. Now, I was watching Gatland's press conference, and he did explain that the reason he talked about pinching certain positions because he wants that extra cover in the backs. So if you look at Liam Williams, if you look at Lee Halfpenny, they're very injury prone. So I think he wanted that extra winger in there, and he had to take from somewhere, and he's taking from the scrum half, and he's hoping that they won't pick up any injuries. So he talked about Thomas Williams and Gareth Davis being quite robust. And we hope they are, because do we really want to see Sam Costello as the backup 9? I actually think I do, just for shits and giggles now. But he's taken a gamble. I could see why he's done it, but there's been a lot of talk about Gareth Anscombe. He was always going to go. He was always going to be in our squad. Gatland loves Anscombe. And I can guarantee you, if he's fit, he will be in our 23. I don't know whether he starts at 10 or whether he's a replacement, but he will be in our 23. And you could easily argue, as I have for a number of years, that he is Wales' best attacking 10. But of course, he's taken a gamble with so many players that are not fit.
But with Anscombe, though, right, I think that's a weakness on Gatland's behalf, because he's taken a player. When was the last time Anscombe actually played a game? Can you remember when?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I don't know. No. It's been a long time, isn't it?
Yeah. So, why? I don't think he played on Judgment Day. I think he was out.
I thought there was Anscombe. There was Anscombe, Owen Williams 10-12, which is why Kieran Williams was at 13. Or was that Owen Williams, Joe Hawkins?
Either way, he's been out injured for a long time. He's been injured for the entire training camp. He's been, he's had an iffy season at best with injuries and, not really finding his form. And then we're going to take him to a World Cup, and if you start him against Fiji, those boys are going, right, I'm having your ribs, I'm having your kneecaps, somebody's having your ankles, but one way or another, son, you're off by halftime, because they're going to target him. And the same for some of the other teams, they got big back rows. And if you're anywhere in that back row and that 10 is just coming back from an injury and maybe isn't 100%, his ribs are yours. That first opportunity you get, his ribs are gone. And I can't see why we're taking that risk with him. I agree with you, Jamie. That Gatland.
He's a Gatland favourite. He's a Gatland favourite.
And I think that's a weakness for Gatland. I think if he cannot look at it and go, why am I going to risk my reputation on a player who blows hot and cold, hasn't played for a long time, and is prone to injury? I'm surprised to see Halfpenny there as well, simply because of the injuries. I know we had a good game against England, but he puts his back out tying his shoelaces genuinely, and I wouldn't risk that many injury-prone players for such a big tournament. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, so you got two members of that squad who haven't had any game time in the warm-up fixtures, and that was Gareth Anscombe and Tanuki Falto. And there's absolutely no doubt that Gatland is taking a risk with some of these players. But he knows them, they're experienced. We know that Anscombe can cover 10 and 15. He was, to my mind, he was always going to be in our squad. Unless he was officially ruled out through injury, he was always going to be there. So I'm not surprised he's there. Looking at the wingers now, I'm really pleased for Rio Dyer, because, look, he's young. I know he makes mistakes. He's not the finished article yet. But by God, that boy works so hard. And we saw it against South Africa. He was excellent in the air. He works really, really hard. And I'm delighted for him. I'm delighted for his family. I love that video of his mum and his sister, putting up social media cheering, and his mum at the end going, fuck it now. It was just lovely. It was a really lovely moment. I'm delighted for him. When I look at the backs, though, I've said this to you so many times. I'm still concerned about the centres. We know that North is going to start at 15. Who starts at 12 now? Because you got Nick Tompkins, who is a big ball of chaos. We all know that, right? But, he does have relatively good experience. And then you got Johnny Williams, who, for me, I like Johnny Williams a lot, right? I like him for the Scarlets. But he's very much a mixed bag player. We saw it as well against South Africa. He does some really good stuff, but then he does some stupid shit, like having interception and coughing up possession. Is he going to be durable for this World Cup campaign? I still don't know what our best centre partnership is, by the way. I've got no idea against Fiji. Who is he going to go for? I honestly don't know. And the centres worry me. They do. Out of all the positions in the back line, I am still concerned about the centre. Because North's, as you rightly said, North's positioning is problematic at times. Does he go with Johnny Williams or does he go with Nick Tompkins? I honestly don't know. I am worried about the centres. I
think the issue with the centres is our best defensive centre isn't in the squad. And, I think if you put Johnny Williams defensive and Nick Tompkins defensively at inside centre are both pretty solid. It's outside centre where we've got the issues. And Mason Grady, George North, whoever you put there is vulnerable. So you've then got to manipulate your defensive backline in order to make up for that gap at 13. And whether that's pulling the fullback out of position, meaning that your blindside wingers to pendulum around or whatever, whether that means bringing your open side winger in tight and hoping that your 15 can cover. Do you know what I mean? At international level, you shouldn't have to be making allowances for a weak defensive 13. And that's my issue with that. I think Grady and North going forward, lovely flowing locks flowing in the wind, lovely big smile, lovely nice teeth glowing at the camera, going, hey, look at me, I'm amazing. Defensively, it's they're like a bloody demented octopus. And
I think Robertson's unlucky. I actually think Joe Robertson is very unlucky, and I really like the look of him at Twickenham. I suspect Mason Grady has got the nod because he can cover wing. Because in a small squad like this, you need versatility. And there's a lot of players who are covering different positions. I did wonder if Grady was going to make the cut after that really bad howler against South Africa. But I've got no issue with him being there. I know Ospreys fans are losing their shit over Kieran Williams. That was always an outside bet, Kieran Williams. And I love Kieran Williams. I've spoken about it many times in the pod. He looked lively when he played at Twickenham against England, but I don't think he did himself any favours with that holding on penalty. I don't think that went down well with Gatland at all. But I mean, I never saw Kieran Williams being in this squad. He was one of those guys who always had an outside shot.
I think,
but yeah,
I think he plays the Osprey system really well. I don't think that necessarily replicates itself in the Welsh system. I think that Crash Bang 12, lovely jubbly, and they base everything on the fact that they throw two of their back row into the fact he's going to make 10 meters and a quick turnover and away you go. That doesn't happen at international level. But Harley, what were you going to say, mate?
I was going to say I agree. I think Joe Roberts should have gone. I think in a lot of these, and we can talk about a lot of these things, I think wherever there was sort of a 50-50, I think the more, the player with more caps wins out. I was thinking with said, speaking of not necessarily fitting the system, I think Max Llewellyn wasn't necessarily given the sort of best chance with what Gatlin wanted him to. So in the first game, he was sort of just there to pass. They didn't really use him as a running, as an actual running threat, and when you watch him play for Cardiff this season, he was cutting such a hard line, you had to defend him, and then he was using his ball skills to pass it out, whether it be Lilo, Grady, one of the wingers. I don't think he necessarily had that. I really don't like Llewellyn at 13. I know he's moved out a lot, particularly to accommodate Ben Thomas in the past, and I really think it was just sort of a case of they thought, right, I feel like they took Mason Grady off because he had a bit of a howler, and it was better for him to just come off the park. Because I feel like, again, as I was saying with Tom Rogers at that point, I feel like it was getting to the point where it was getting into his head, and he was making a mistake, and then he was back in, and then to try and make up for that mistake, he tried too hard, made another mistake and another mistake. Whereas I feel like with Johnny Williams, he gave that intercept pass, and it was not next job because he's an experienced enough player. You got to remember, Joe Roberts is great, but Joe Roberts is a bit older and has been around a bit longer than Mason Grady. Mason Grady is still only 2021. He was playing in the under 20s last season. So he's definitely gonna get there. I think the big surprise is the five back three players and only two scrum halves. I feel like Kieran Hardy didn't really do anything wrong to miss out. I think it is just a case of Gatlin does not trust anyone but Liam Williams and Lee Halfpenny at 15.
Yeah. Well,
or maybe Anscombe, and I think he's not sure enough on Anscombe, which is the only reason I'd have taken him.
Well,
I'm guessing they're just certain he's going to be fit to play at least for Portugal.
Well, we'll wrap up the backs with one issue that I have with the backs, right? And that is Louis Rees-Sammet's hair. He looks like something from a 1930s Poirot kind of thing, with the slicked over curtains and all of that kind of stuff. If you're going to go to a World Cup, make a bit of an effort. With some of the boys have had bleach, some of them have had like extensions and shit put in. I know Thomas Francis has still got the mullet and all of that kind of stuff. I think retro 1930s, even though lovely boy, model looks and all of that kind of stuff, but the 1930s hair just isn't doing it for me.
I just say one thing before we move on to the forwards, because your favourite boy, George North, right?
Yeah.
Fair play to him. This will be his fourth World Cup. Whatever people think of him, that is a very, very impressive achievement. And I think that should be mentioned. And also Sam Costello, all the talk from certain people about his size,
nothing.
Not buying that bollocks, because he has proven that, yes, again, he's raw. He will make mistakes. He can cut it at this level, and he's a talent. And I'm glad that he's on the plane as well. Because this stuff about size, I think we focus far too much on size, but actually you've got to have the other attributes as well. It's not just purely about size.
So I was at the park one day when seniors were training, and Costello's there, and he is only Diddy, height wise he's Diddy.
Yeah.
And he took his shirt off, and I'm like, fucking hell, son, put your shirt back on. You're embarrassing us, because the guy is solid. He's like, he is made of rock solid cement. And I'm going like, oh, come on, some of us have still got the winter coverage on. Give us a break. Do it in the changing rooms. Take your shirt off in there, not where everyone can see just how ripped you are. So anyway, right, let's have a look at the forwards. So we got Basham, Beard. That's always going to be the controversy. Elliot D, Domachowski, Ryan Elias, we'll talk about that one. Falatau, like I say, we haven't seen him. Thomas Francis, Jenkins, Dowie Lake, who may or may not be injured. Dylan Lewis, Dan Lidgett, Jack Morgan, Tommy Raphael, Will Rowlands, Nicky Smith, Gareth Thomas, Henry Thomas, Chris Shunzer. That, given how long Shunzer has been around, people should know how to spell his bloody surname by now. And Aaron Wainwright. The amount of misspellings I've seen for Shunzer over the weekend are just ridiculous. So yeah, Harley, what you make of the forwards, mate? Who do you
so big headlines is they've decided that both Elias and Lake are going to be fit, and by the sound of it, Elias was sort of maybe ready for last weekend, but they sort of went, or they, with one of them, they said could have made it, but they thought there's no point throwing him in and risking an injury. So they should both be ready for, I think, and we should add that Dewi Lake and Jack Morgan are co-captains. And, they shared captaincy duties when they were for under 20s, and, they've been playing together ever since Nippers, and everyone always comments on how well they complement each other as sort of personalities and captaincy styles. So that's going to be quite interesting to see. For me, the big headline is in the second row. I think Gatlin made a mistake with his locks in 2019. I think he's done it again here. So in 2019, he took 4 locks, including Corey Hill, who was injured. In the end, he couldn't play. Adam Beard was a bit more unfortunate, but I feel like they should have, before they shipped out, they should have dropped Corey Hill and brought in Bradley Davis straight away. Because if you were adamant that you're going to take Adam Beard, then that is the level of how certain Adam Beard's place was in this squad. He had a burst appendix the night before flying out, and Gatland nursed him through until the quarterfinals, and had Aaron Shingler covering on the bench for about 3 games, which could have cost us those games, because if you look, our scrum started going backwards as soon as Shingler moved into second row, because he can sort of cover a second row thing, which is why I'm worried Shunzer covering second row, because although we've got a week, pretty much a full week, the first 3 games are all a week apart, maybe 6 days. That's a lot of work, that Beard and Rowlands, who you presume are going to be our starting lock pairing. Although as I said earlier, I think David Jenkins is a much better option, but I don't think Beard is necessarily a person off the bench. They're going to be getting through a lot of work, and you want to rest them at some point. And I'm not sure if Shunzer is for me, he's an emergency second row cover as opposed to the guy you want being your second row cover.
I reckon he's a better second row than he is back row. I genuinely do.
I think he definitely has the potential. I just don't think he's had enough. He's pretty much, other than when he went in for the second England game, his only real second row experience was under 20s. He's not really played there. He certainly hasn't played there for Wales, and he hasn't been playing there for the Chiefs. So that's where I'm more nervous. Like, I'd be much happier, I thought I couldn't decide. I was 50-50 on Rhys Davis or Ben Carter. Personally, but I thought one of them would go just purely to have an extra second row there. Back row, I know he's been making his tackles, but I found Lydiate wanting for most of these games. When you watch them once or twice, you start looking for particular players, and I wanted Lydiate to be there, absolutely scything people down, whereas he's just sort of making the hit, but he's not really making them stay hit, and it's not giving the opportunity for the Jackal. He's not offering a carrying threat. He's not blitzing the attacking ruck. But I know he's a Gatlin favourite as well. So I do feel this tournament is almost a bit of a swan song. And I get that, with the likes of Lydia and Lee Halfpenny, they're players who Gatlin wants in the squad, even if they don't play a minute, because they're going to set standards. and they're going to help bring the younger players through, which is equally important. Not surprised about Dylan Lewis going, because I think Azarati, is very raw, and then it just, it's three. Then you've got three props. I think our strongest tight heads are going to be, our main tight heads for Fiji and Australia are going to be Francis and Henry Thomas.
Yeah.
But I think Dylan Lewis is, Gatland likes him. He's one of the better players over the ball. And that, it's no real surprises. If you told me at the start of the tournament, I wouldn't have taken Tane Basham, but I think he's really shown up well as an 8. And I'd play him at 8. I wouldn't really waste time putting him as a 7.
I was surprised, though. I was surprised they took Basham and Wainwright, because I thought it was going to be one or the other. And I think why they've done that is because I still think there's a concern around Turupe Faletau. They're pinning all their hopes on Faletau, and if he doesn't make it, then they've got the option then of Wainwright or Basham, who can cover 6, 7, 8, and cover that 8 position as well. But I was surprised both Wainwright and Basham got called up. I'm delighted for both players. I think
Wainwright was a certainty. I think Basham coming, is the odd one. And I think Shunza, I think his showing at set, although everyone's been complaining because he's not been as much of a superstar as people wanted, I think he has done everything. He's done the bare minimum, and he does have that raw talent. I think he's not been used correctly. I think maybe Gatland's going to work out the right way to use him. I think Plumtree was a bit unlucky that I think he got a bit too over emotional in Twickenham. And I think that and the shoulder injury, so he may not be ready until possibly Australia.
He'd have been in the squad. If he was fit, he'd be in. Plumtree, absolutely. Injury is kept him out.
I mean, they did mention him as an injury concern, but I think his shoulder he wasn't going to be. I think for Plumtree, I think if he was going to be in the squad, he'd be, primed for Portugal game. And I think if you're not going to miss the Portugal game, then the only game really you might put him on is Georgia, and then Georgia, I think we're still going to want to go quite a strong team, because I feel like we're going to be very similar to 2019. We're going to, the sort of Australia, Fiji, Georgia, we're going to basically pick as close to our strongest 15, strongest 23 as possible for those three. And then the fourth game is going to, in that Portugal game, which comes as, actually, I think is where Gatland's once again mirrored using the warm-ups. What he thinks is how he's going to plan things. Because if you look, he used a very similar team for the first and third week, and then a completely changed team for the second week. And I think that's probably what we'll see in the World Cup.
So my question for you on the forwards was going to be about Faletau. Was, in the same way as Anscombe, are we, we haven't seen Faletau. He has been out injured. I think he played 4 games for Cardiff this season, and they were all start. No, I don't think I think he started maybe 4, but he has had a lot of kind of niggles, and no, we're just protecting him for this, and we're just protecting him for that, and what have you. Why risk
Talupe Faletau played over 1,000 minutes for Cardiff across all competition, and starting basically all but one game he played in, he started. So I mean,
how many starts did he have? How many starts did he have? And how long was he out injured for at the end of the season?
He had 13 starts out of 14 games played, and then obviously that last game he played was Judgment Day, where I'm pretty sure he played the full 80. Okay. And I think this injury is sort of by the sound of it, was a calf injury picked up in like the pre-warm-up counts, and it was one of those they could play him, but they're keeping their powder dry.
I thought he was injured.
I think Faletau's a player you want for the knockouts. Yeah, I think Faletau's a player who, even if he's off on an injury, he comes back and he's still going to be one of the best players on the park.
But I thought he had more injuries. It felt like he had more injuries than that through the season. He is one of those players, the same as Liam Williams, who great when they're on form, but constantly injured. And when you've got that many other injuries in the squad, so Tane Basham's just potentially had quite a nasty HIA against England. I know we came back and played against South Africa, but that would still be a concern for me. And then you've got Ryan Elias and Dewi Lake, like we've spoken about, injured. You've then got Faletau injured as well, it doesn't take much to knock the guts out of that pack. Yeah. And as good as he is, he's vulnerable. And I think the issue is who do you bring in? And with Plumtree out injured as well, there isn't really that much depth. The guy in the Ospreys that we all wanted to see at the start, what's his name?
Morgan Morris.
Yeah, that we all said should be there. I think if he'd have been in the squad, I think there's a strong chance there that Faletau may not have made that squad just because.
Oh no, he would have been.
Yeah,
there.
I don't think.
There.
I think
he would definitely.
But it's the same as Anscombe. You're basing your squad on, what they've done in the past. We're not basing Anscombe's selection on what he's done in the warm-ups or what he's done at the end of the season, because he was crap. End of the season he wasn't very good at all, and then he's injured and we haven't seen him. Same as Faletau for a couple of decent games through the season, right at the start of the season, and then a couple of iffy ones at the end, and then injuries. And that's what I'm saying. If we're going to be ruthless, which I don't think Gatland has been on this, I think he's kind of selected players based on the last time he was in charge.
I understand what you're saying. But certain players, you got to take a risk on because they're world class. And Talupe Faletau is one of those players, and he's absolutely right to take him because he is the kind of player who can be out for a long time, could be out of action for a long time, but come straight back into a Wales squad and get a play with a match performance. Honestly, he is crucial to Wales. He is world class. If he is missing, right, during this World Cup, I think we're in trouble. I think we really need Faletau. However, I have been heartened by Aaron Wainwright because he is starting now to show some proper potential and some really good ball carrying at 8. If he puts in that kind of performance as we saw against England in Cardiff, in the World Cup, then that's going to serve Wales well. But make no mistake, if Faletau is ruled out or he's not fit, that is a massive blow for Wales. He is really integral to this team. I understand what you're saying, but some players, it is partly about reputation, but Faletau is world class and he's got to be there as far as I'm concerned.
I think it's the same as what we did with Josh, with Pivac was doing with Josh Navidi towards the end was, he's basically coming back from an injury, playing a game, showing the reason why he keeps getting selected. I think with Faletau, he doesn't really have bad games. A bad game for Faletau is a 7 out of 10. But for Cardiff, he dragged us kicking and screaming through that season. We would not have had anywhere near as respectable a season as we did. Remember, we finished with an above 50% win rate. And, the games where we looked absolutely out of it were the games were the few games where Faletau didn't play.
So
I agree with Anscombe. I think that's not a risk we've taken. I would have thought if you're going to take a fifth back three, I would have probably dropped I'd have taken Owen Williams and dropped the centre and used him as the centre cover.
So I
think Faletau's worth it.
So my final question then around the back row, do you play Tommy Reffell and Jack Morgan? Forget about number 8 for a minute, whether that's Wainwright, I'd like to see Shunza there myself, but or Faletau, do you play Jack Morgan and Tommy Reffell on the pitch at the same time?
I would tend to lean towards no, but Jack Morgan, I think, is one of those rare open sides who I think will quite happily switch to the job of a 6 quite well. If you look at his tackling numbers and like how aggressively he tackles, a bit like when Faletau would go to 6 and Navidi would go to 6 to allow Tipuric to do his thing at 7. It could work. I'd rather not. Personally, for me, my back row would be Jack Morgan, Wainwright, and then depending on whether or not Faletau's fit. Then you're looking at, if Faletau's fit, Wainwright I'd put the 6. Because I know, although he wants to focus on 8, I think he is. I think, for me, Wainwright's almost undroppable and you need him in there. 1, he's a line-out option, and like a genuinely good line-out option. 2, he's just his work around the park, and he's now carrying with a lot of gusto, whether it's in the wild channels or in the tight. And then for 6, imagine Gatland is going to go for Lydiate there. And I do get all the criticisms around Chunza, so I see why I'd probably put Chunza more on the bench. and have him coming off for impact, because I think that works quite well. But I'm still a fan. I'm a fan of Junza. I like what he does, but I do get the criticisms that he's not doing what everyone wants him to do. If that makes sense. It does add a contra. I mean, I've got a strong feeling I think the pack for Fiji is probably going to be, you're probably looking at Nicky Smith, Ryan Lyons, because it sounds like he's going to be fit then. Henry Thomas or Thomas Francis, and then you're going to be looking at Beard Rowlands, and then Lydia, Jack Morgan, and I'm going to assume that Wainwright isn't. Wainwright's going to be 8 because Faletau isn't quite there yet, and I imagine they're looking for him to be back for maybe give him an easy, basically give his warm up game, not to disrespect Portugal, but his warm up game to be the Portugal game, and then go from there.
Okay. So, Jane, same question. Do you put Jack Morgan and Tommy Rafael on the pitch, particularly against, I would say particularly Fiji and Australia, because they'll just wreak havoc? No,
I wouldn't actually. I agree with Harvey. I would probably put Wainwright 6, then have Jack a 7, and if fit, Taulupe Faletau. However, I got a feeling that Gatland will select Lydia at the 6. Don't ask me why, it's just a hunch. I think he'll go for that experience and have Lydia at the 6, Jack Morgan at 7, and Taulupe Faletau at 8. The hookers, though, I mean, that's a concern. I mean, I know we're moving on now from the back row, but, we don't know for sure if Ryan Elias is going to be fit. We don't know for sure if Dowie Lake's going to be fit. There could be a real possibility that Elliot D could start that game against Fiji, which I have no issue with, by the way. I think it's a tremendous comeback story. Not many people are talking about that. When you consider him and Wainwright were left out in the wilderness by Pivac, their club form dipped. Elliot D, I know this for a fact, he had a massive bust up with Dean Ryan, and he was very, very close to leaving the Dragons. But fair play, he's bounced back incredibly well. Really pleased for him. Glad he's in the squad. The only thing is, you don't get that scrummaging strength that you do with Ryan Elias. And I've had to roll back on Elias because for a long time I was critical of him. But I have come round to knowing now that our scrum is a lot more solid with Ryan Elias in it. I just wish his arrows were better. But, that's a concern for me. And what happens if Elias and Dowie Lake isn't fit? We are taking a risk, aren't we, on a lot of players who we're hoping, we're going to be, like Scotland said in the press conference, we're confident we'll be fit. Yeah, but there's no guarantees. And it is a worry that we do carry quite a lot of injured players at the moment,
I think it's worth mentioning with the way World Rugby is set up, the World Cup, that in terms of replacing injured players, because I'll go into why this is an issue, why it's be an issue, particularly with the 2 scrum halves, but you are not allowed to replace a player through suspension or a player who has been announced in the squad as carrying an injury. It can only be an injury sustained in training or a World Cup match since the squad's been submitted. So if you're for example, now Faletau's going in as someone who's carrying an injury, and he can't play, that's it. You're down to 32. With a player who gets replaced as well, I mean, you can also do compassionate reasons. They have to basically immediately stop their accreditation and they're out. So if Thomas Williams
once you're out,
you cannot return. So say the first game, Thomas Williams starts and he gets concussed in the first game in the first 5 minutes. You've then got to decide: can you get him to recover? And are you happy having Sam Costello, what will be potentially a 12-day stand down? So you're potentially looking at Portugal and maybe Australia with Sam Costello covering 9.
Well, do you know what?
Otherwise, you've then got to send Thomas Williams home and go, I'm using Thomas because Cardiff bias.
Well,
but you've got to send that player home. And, if you do it to a back row, use that excuse then to bring in your extra second row or a scrum half.
Yeah.
Because if you remember in the World Cup, 2019 World Cup, when they sent Josh Video, they actually called Owen Lane up to be an extra back through cover. And so Owen Lane's got 1 World Cup cap, and it's in a bronze playoff match
But maybe next week we'll go through some of the World Cup. We'll have a look at our opponents. We'll have a look at some of our expected teams and how it's going to roll. Because we've got bugger all to review, to preview for next week, and because there's nothing now until the World Cup. So maybe over the next couple of weeks we'll have a look at some of our opponents. Fiji are going to give us a decent look at themselves. So maybe we'll cover some of the things that we're hoping for in the World Cup, and we'll have a look at the opposition next week, and we'll go into that in a bit more depth. And I'm sure it's Welsh rugby. There'll be something that'll pop up.
There's always something to talk.
There's always going to be something in between now and then. They're going to rename the Millennium Stadium as the Pornhub Central or something like that. There'll be something for us to talk about next week.
I'm all for that. If it brings you more money, do it. Let's do it.
Just before we go, can I just put it in because of the whole thing with rugby rumours? Did anyone see the new Ospreys training kit? Now, if that isn't just asking for a rumour of a nature.
Okay. We'll start with that one next week in Jamie's news desk. Right. Gents, been a pleasure as always. Lovely talking to you. We'll catch up. We'll do this all again next week. Enjoy your rugby. Have a good one. I shall see you again next week. All the best.
No stuff. Ta-ra.
Thank you for listening to the Wrap Podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed recording it. Please do rate us and tell your friends, as it really helps us to grow and get better. We'll be back next week with more of the same, and until then, enjoy your rugby.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.